From mountain to sea, Hawaiians used every available portion of water for the growing of fish. The cool mountain streams, they would grow fish in their taro lo'i. Further downstream were the local wai. Local means pond and wai means fresh water. These were freshwater ponds. Closer to the shoreline were the local pu'u'one. Pu'u'one means sand dune or sand heap. And as you can see, these ponds were still inland, but they were separated from the shore by a sand dune. They were connected to the ocean through the Auwai Kai, or saltwater channel. And in this way, the pond water could be regulated. Salt water could be let into the pond. Very often, these ponds were fed by springs or streams. These ponds were brackish water, and brackish water, according to the Hawaiians, grew the very sweetest fish. Most often, these ponds grew ava and aholehole and ama-ama. From the shoreline, we enter into the ocean to the local kuapa. Kuapa means wall, and what these ponds were essentially were a long rock wall that embraced part of the ocean and captured it to the shoreline.
Kaneohe Bay was a very productive bay, particularly for mullet and ava. When McAllister, the archaeologist, was here in 1929 and 1930, he noted that there were about 23 fish ponds in Kaneohe Bay alone. And I guess Heia was one of the larger ones, and this is Heia Pond, 88 acres, with a wall that is about 5,000 feet long. Unusual because it goes completely around the pond. Of course, these walls were built by Hawaiians who lived in the area. They were a tremendous undertaking to get these large stones down here. There are no stones like this naturally in Kaneohe Bay. Of course, Hawaiian fish ponds were built right on the reef, which means the wall enclosed a portion of the reef, so that the ecology of that reef didn't really change drastically, but a fish pond enhanced the resources of the reef, putting fresh water into the pond and bringing all the nutrients down from inland and putting them in the pond enhanced the growth of the algae in the pond, which of course then encouraged the fish to come in, enhancing the resources of the land and the sea. This pond was said to grow some of the sweetest mullet of all the islands. The mullet were able to be raised very large, some of them up to 3 feet, and that's big mullet, anai. In Hawaiian times, it was said that the land was fat if it had a fish pond, and that meant that the resources of the land were enhanced by the presence of a fish pond. In the old days, they tell us that when the pond had to be cleaned, everybody living on the land got into it and they cleaned it. In exchange for that labor, they were able to feed themselves also from the pond. Kamakau tells us this. Sharing and working together and calling everybody together. Many of the ponds, you know, we talked about the 23 or 24 ponds in Kaneohe Bay in the 1930s. Many of those ponds have been filled in and houses built on them, so that urbanization is right along the edge of Kaneohe Bay now. The ponds were filled in by dredging the bay, the reefs of the bay. A lot of this was done in the 40s, primarily, when the military established itself out at Mokapu. Spoils from the dredge were often put into the fish ponds. Many of the ponds are filled in and not even recognizable today as having been ponds. We're now at Kahana Bay, this beautiful valley, and we're right in the middle of Huilua Fish Pond. This is the walled pond, the Kuapa Pond at Kahana. Now let's see if we can find some pua over here. There they are. Woo, nice. You know, Hawaiians knew which fish were herbivorous and which fish were carnivorous. And they selected the herbivorous fish to put in their ponds because you create the food for them and they come into the ponds. They eat and get fat, and then you close the gate so they can't get out. And you've got yourself a natural food bank. One of the stories that Mr. Kekona told me, he was one of the late ones to manage the pond, was that he had a favorite mullet to swim around in the pond, and they called him John Bull. He's a big, fat mullet. And he used to come over to the makaha and call him. And John Bull would come out of the pond, and he'd come and he'd tickle him underneath his chin, and he just loved that. They're very friendly mullet. And then he'd instruct him to go out and round up a few mullet for dinner that night. And so John Bull would disappear, and pretty soon he'd come back, and there'd be 3 or 4 mullet following him, and Kekona would close the makaha gate, and he'd pick up the mullet with his hands. He wouldn't have to go fishing or anything. There was the mullet for him, and then he'd let John Bull out to go back into the pond. And this is what he told me. I'm just telling you what he said. I think it's a great story.
This is really what a fish pond is all about. Hawaiians call it limu, and on it are what we call diatoms, minute plants that the fish consume and grow on. The favorite fish raised in fish ponds was the gray mullet. They are what we call herbivores. They eat the plant food and grow fat. By observing these fish, Hawaiians discovered something terribly important. They discovered that you could raise protein in fish ponds for people to eat that was 100 times more productive than depending on the natural food chain. In the natural food chain, tiny crabs and shrimp feed on limu. The crabs and the shrimp get eaten by small fish. Then the small fish get eaten by big fish, and finally, the big fish get eaten by human beings. That's the natural food chain. In a fish pond, herbivores skip a couple of links in the natural food chain by eating algae and then becoming the food for human beings. The Hawaiians, of course, were extremely sensitive to their environment and observed all these things going on with the plant life and the animal life in the ponds. So they concentrated on raising the herbivore link of the food chain. The reef was already productive. By placing a wall around part of a reef, Hawaiians created a pond that protected the herbivore fish from the large carnivorous fish. So we have here tremendous production. Actually, it was an enhancement of the natural resources because they grew the same thing that grew in the ocean naturally, but they grew more of it. Nowhere else in Polynesia did any people create fish ponds like these. These Hawaiian fish ponds are unique in the Pacific.
According to a survey that was made around 1901, 1902, a fellow by the name of John Cobb estimated that there were about 350 fish ponds in Hawaii at the time of discovery. But even in 1902, when Cobb did a survey, he discovered that there were over 1 million pounds of fish still being raised in Hawaiian fish ponds. And in 1975, there were only about 20,000 pounds of fish coming from fish ponds. The fish pond raising has gone really downhill, and it's too bad because here is perhaps the most efficient way for producing protein for mankind. Here we are at Anaiho'omalu. This is a good example of a pond that is constructed just inland of the sand dune, sand beach. This pond used to be absolutely clear. Well, what's happening is there's too much nutrients in the pond. And I think one of the problems is that all the fertilizer that you use to keep your golf course green and all the water, that you put on it to keep it nice and green eventually ends up in the pond. Yeah, here's the kaku, barracuda, insatiable carnivore. A kaku can really consume an awful lot of fish, and that's what you don't want in your pond. I think he had his breakfast already. He's just waiting for lunch. Of course, every fish pond has eels in it. This is our makaha. Right now, the tide is going out, so the water is flowing out of the pond and out into the ocean. These two gates can provide an area where they can capture the fish. When the tide is coming in, the fish tend to come into the makaha to get the cool salt water that comes into the pond. And so they'll come right up against the gate, in essence trying to get out, and you put the gate down behind them. So you've got them locked into a very small space here, and you can take a scoop net and just scoop up your lunch. This is a technique of capturing the fish so that you don't have to sweep the whole pond. Now these small pua that are just outside the makaha are just waiting in order for the tide to change. And when the water stops flowing out, they'll come in, many of them will come into the pond through the makaha and get taken in by the flow of the water.
In Hawaiian times, there were enough schools of mullet that were coursing up and down the coastline producing these baby fish, so that very naturally these fish would aggregate around the outside of the ponds and go into the ponds at high tide and populate the fish pond in a very natural way. Later on, when fish ponds were used commercially, one of the things the pond keepers did was to go up and down the coastline and catch these tiny little fish to stock their ponds. They caught the pua in nets to take them back to the fish pond, transporting them in water tanks in their trucks.
O ka mea nui o ka lahui pa'a, ke ia mau lokuia, li ke ole o ke ia wahi, haupua e ke aloha, ke ike wau I ke ia mau ia, a me ke ia mau mea I loko ka lokuia. Aloha no wau ke ia wahi o ka lahui pa'a. These ponds that we have here at Kalahuipo are perhaps some of the best examples of Hawaiian aquaculture that we do have preserved for us. Perhaps the most significant feature of Kalahuipo is this natural cluster of fish ponds like we have here. This pond is really a good example of a pond, a larger pond, Lahuipo, a fish pond that was divided into a smaller pond, which made it a more easier, manageable unit for the Hawaiians who did work the fish ponds. The pond walls that we have here, which are called kuapau, were constructed around that period, somewhere between 1200 and 1400 AD. Before the wall was completed, they did add the makaha, which is uniquely found in Hawaiian fish ponds. The traditional makaha consisted of these vertical wooden poles, which were usually ohia, that were lashed together with the ia vine, a vine found in the mountains. The purpose of the makaha was to allow a greater inflow or greater volume of seawater into the ponds to help with circulation, and it also, because of the spaces in between the poles, it allowed small fries such as a pu'ama, or the baby mullet, and the pu'ava, which is a small ava. It would allow them in the ponds, as well as the many other varieties of fish you find in the ponds today, including predators such as the barracuda and the papio. The other important thing about the makaha was, besides allowing water into the ponds for circulation, fish from the sea that could fit through the greater poles would enter the ponds, and basically grazing off of the natural algae, seaweed, microorganisms found in the pond, they would get to a size too big to fit back out to the gate and get back out to the sea.
One of the uses that the makaha has is a fish trap. On the incoming tide, when the tide comes in, it flows through this makaha system right here, through the rocks and through the kiawe posts that we have placed. The fish would come from the pond into this pen system, and we could close the gate and we can harvest mullet, ava. Basically, the makaha would be the heart of the fish pond. And it's a unique system. It really works and it's really effective.
Kaloko Pond, where we are now, at the Makai end of Kaloko Ahupua, is a walled pond, Kuapa. It connects the headlands of Small Bay. So this is one of the walled ponds of Kekaha, Kona.
This pond, Kaloko and Aimaka Pond, we find that on the perimeter of the ponds, they have these compartments. There may be a possibility that they would gather the fish, put it into this giant pond here, and then from here, whatever they could segregate after they surround it with the nets and segregate the fish, by species, and then whatever the king's favorite fish, for that day, they would get it here. I mean, that's one theory. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's one theory.
The fish of the day. But this is an unusually deep pond, so that it's very difficult to fish this pond when you have to get the fish out. So when I talked to the people who used to work this pond, they said that you only fish this pond at nighttime, so that you go out in the middle of the night when there's no moon and the fish can't see the shadow of the net. And you go very quietly, you go in a boat, a small flat-bottom boat, and you put your nets so the fish can't go from one place to another. And everybody's keeping very quiet, and you hope that when you pull your net up, you hope you got some fish in it.
Since 1986, one of the concerns was what kind of outside influences were intruding into the fish pond. And we found that the red mangrove was one of the intrusions. And in order to protect the cultural value of the fish pond, we had to come in and remove the red mangrove from the fish pond. And the way we're doing it is by mainly manual labor. And we have to try to do something, because within 10 years, another 10 years, we will overtake all of the fish ponds that is here in West Hawaii.
The mangrove, my understanding that it was introduced in the early 1900s to Molokai, and so now you find that it's very extensive in most of the ponds and along the shorelines along the coast of Molokai. Right now we're looking at Ali'i Fish Pond. It's about 46 acres, but it's partially filled now, and people today still come into this pond, the local people, and they come and crab inside. They come lama nighttime. Right now this is Kanoa Fish Pond. It's in the Ahupua of Makakupaia. If you look at the fish pond, toward the middle portion, you can see the Hawaiians, how they built it. So there's a slight little harbor coming in. See that green harbor out there? So fish would usually run in areas like that. So they probably came into those areas and probably came into, at certain points where the maka is, into the pond area. We're now at the location of Kupeke Fish Pond in the Ahupua of Kupeke. It was noted in ancient times for having fat o'io, or bonefish. And there's still a lot of o'io now in this pond. The first pond that we're seeing up from here, Mauka, is Pipio Fish Pond. It's almost completely encircled by mangrove. The following pond that has a wall from one point of land to another is called Ni'aupala. And after Ni'aupala is called Kaope Ahina. We are now looking at Puhaloa Fish Pond. It is almost now completely enclosed by mangrove. This is Kiawe Nui Fish Pond, and it's a large pond with almost a straight wall joining 2 points of land. This is called Kainaohe Fish Pond. So on the land side of the pond, there are 2 lo'i that feed directly into the pond. The next pond we're looking at is Walapui Pond.
This is Walapui Valley. The stream come out to there. So all these rocks came from Walapui. How we building the wall, we're putting big stones and packing them down with ili stone, which is smaller stones, and then putting a layer of coral.
And you know, it's a skill for set rocks without cement and how to set them for big, make them pass strong, eh? You gotta take your time, get pride in your job, and do the best you can. You know, when you're doing a good job, you can feel the mana of the wall, you know, and you can feel the strength of the wall when you do them right. I going to die, but my grandson going to tell his son, your great-grandfather built and rebuilt this foundation wall. The maka is controlling what goes in the pond and what you like keep out of the pond. So the maka going to play a major role, especially when a tide going to start running in, all the fish going to come against the current here. And when the tide going to come out, all the fish going to come like come in a pond. They go against the current every time. Fish pond is a challenge, you know, in raising mullet amama. What we gotta do is give the mullet a 2 to 3 year lifestyle in the pond. Then, you know, that amama going known as the makainana for the pond. Also, we're going to be feeding them. And when we feed the fish, it becomes tame. And it belongs to this pond. And he no like go out, stay in a pond. Then 2, 3 years down the road, the anai or the big anai, he start reproducing in the pond. And then we don't need every year go out, go look for baby pool, bring in. We're going to get our own hatchery within nature itself. The key is the patience, yeah?
Okay, this pond is basically fed through springs, and the water quality is really good for raising fish. Types of fish that we have: trout, mullet, hole, tilapia. This is called the makaha. The old Hawaiians used to catch their fish using this system where the mullet or the hole come in through here because they want to go out to the ocean to spawn. And once they get in through here, we close these gates you see in the front here, and that's the way how we trap the fish. We trap the fish in this box and transfer into these cages back here, and then we take it back to the holding pens we have in the front. What we do is we keep them in smaller cages, and then once they get bigger, then we put them into bigger cages and bigger holding pens. And basically they take about 8 to 10 months to get to market size.
The whole goal behind what we're doing is to develop a round pond farm in the state of Hawaii. You know, is to make aquaculture, shrimp aquaculture, successful in the state. Last year we ran this pond for three separate cycles. Total time was about 46 weeks, and we produced 19,800 pounds in this pond. As a matter of fact, this pond outproduced at least 5 or 6 of these 1 acre ponds last year. So we're real proud of that. The whole concept behind this system is with a round pond and a center drain and current drivers such as the paddle wheel and the water here, we're keeping the environment clean for the shrimp, and that is essential in intensive culture. I like to say that this pond was designed not by engineers, but by the guys who actually are in the mud, in the muck, working with shrimp. And those are the guys that are going to tell you, you know, how to best design a system that will work. You know, this system here Right now we're using it for shrimp, but I'm sure it would work real well for fish too. So even though we're in a modern world with heavy technology and what have you, to me the true success story is taking the old and the new and blending them so that it works.
Ilua mo ke kia I mehe anu He'eia is named because of the ho'ova'ava'a rain. When the rain falls at He'eia, it falls so heavily that all the soil is washed into the sea. At Luamo'o, and Luamo'o is there near the fish pond there, it's the home of the mo'o that was a guardian, a kia'i, of the fish pond and of the people that lived in the area. And I know her name to be Meheanu. I'm told she was a very benevolent kind of mo'o and very friendly to the people, and they really loved her here in this ahupua of He'eia.
One of the things about fish ponds is that every pond had a guardian spirit, and this guardian spirit was called a mo'o. These were great big dragon lizards, and they lived in the pond or close by, and they took care of the pond. And as long as the caretakers, the people, took good care of the pond, the mo'o would make sure that the pond was very reproductive and produced lots of fish. But if you didn't take care of the pond, if you neglected taking care of the pond, or if the chief of the ahupua'a where this pond was located, if the chief was stingy or greedy or anything like that, then the story is that the mo'o would take all the fish away and there would be no fish for anyone. So the message there is take care of the pond